She grabbed his collar and shoved him backward. "Security! Get this filthy beggar out of my gala before he steals something." Evelyn Hart, founder of the most prestigious charity foundation in New York, stared at the man in the torn jacket with pure disgust. She saw the dirt under his fingernails. She saw the old boots. She saw a nobody. But Evelyn made one fatal mistake. The man she just humiliated wasn't homeless. He wasn't a thief. He was James Okonkwo, the anonymous donor who had secretly funded her entire foundation with $50 million. And tonight, he would teach her a lesson worth more than every penny. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The invitation felt heavy in James Okonkwo's hand. He stood outside the Grand Meridian Hotel, watching limousines pull up one after another. Women in diamond necklaces, men in suits that cost more than most people's cars. Photographers snapping pictures, red carpet stretching like a river of blood toward the golden doors. James looked down at himself. His father's old brown jacket worn at the elbows, patched twice on the left sleeve. His work boots still dusty from visiting a construction site that morning. His khaki pants clean but faded. "Daddy, why aren't we going in?" James looked down at his son. Elijah was 7 years old, wearing a simple navy blue suit they had bought at a thrift store last week. The boy had insisted on a red tie because red was his mother's favorite color. His mother. Maya. Gone 7 years now. James knelt down and straightened Elijah's tie. "We're going in, son. I just wanted to look at the stars for a moment." "But there are no stars, Daddy. Too many lights." James smiled. "You're right. You're always right." He took his son's hand. "Let's go meet some interesting people." They walked toward the entrance. A security guard in a black suit held up his hand immediately. Sir, excuse me. This is a private event." James reached into his jacket pocket. "I have an invitation." The guard looked at the envelope, then looked at James. His eyes moved up and down, scanning the old jacket, the dusty boots. His lip curled slightly. "This event is $10,000 a plate, sir." "I'm aware." "May I see some identification?" James pulled out his driver's license. The guard studied it for a long moment, then spoke into his earpiece. James waited. Elijah squeezed his hand tighter. "Daddy, why is he looking at us like that? Like what, son? Like we did something wrong." James squeezed back. "We didn't do anything wrong. Some people just need a little more time to see clearly." The guard handed back the license. "You can go in. But sir, there's a coat check inside. You might want to freshen up." James nodded politely. "Thank you for your concern." They walked through the golden doors. The ballroom was enormous. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted with angels. A live orchestra played soft jazz in the corner. Waiters in white gloves carried champagne on silver trays. Every table was draped in white silk, decorated with roses that probably cost more than a week's groceries for a regular family. James had built 3 buildings more impressive than this one, but nobody here knew that. That was the point. "Daddy, look." Elijah pointed at an ice sculpture of a swan. "Can I touch it?" "Better not, son. Just look. Sometimes looking is enough." A waiter approached them. Young kid, maybe 22, trying to hide his surprise at seeing James. "Can I get you something to drink, sir?" "Water for me. Apple juice for my son, if you have it." "Of course, sir." The waiter paused. "Are you with the catering staff?" James smiled. No anger, just patience. "No. I'm a guest." "Oh. I apologize. I just thought—" "I know what you thought. It's all right. Apple juice, please." The waiter hurried away, face red. Elijah tugged on his father's jacket. "Daddy, why did he think we work here?" James knelt down again, eye to eye with his son. Elijah, do you remember what I told you about the jacket? Grandpa's jacket. That's right. This jacket belonged to your grandfather. He wore it every day when he worked in Lagos. He wore it when he saved money for my school. He wore it when he put me on the plane to America. He said to me, James, this jacket has no value to anyone but us. But to us it is worth more than gold. Never forget where you come from. So you wear it to remember Grandpa? I wear it to remember who I am. And tonight, I wear it because I want to see something important. What do you want to see? James looked around the room. Wealthy people laughing, networking, pretending to care about charity, while checking their stock portfolios on their phones. I want to see who people really are when they think I'm nobody. Evelyn Hart stood near the main stage, surrounded by admirers. She was 53 years old, blonde hair pulled back tight, wearing a red dress that cost $14,000. Her smile was practiced perfect, designed by years of galas and fundraisers and magazine covers. The Hart Foundation was her creation, her legacy. For 15 years, she had built it into one of the most respected charities in New York, helping immigrant families, providing education, building shelters. At least, that's what the brochures said. Evelyn, darling, you look absolutely stunning tonight. Richard, you're too kind. The foundation has done remarkable work this year. The new shelter in Brooklyn, magnificent. We try our best. It's all about giving back. She said the words automatically. She had said them 10,000 times. They meant nothing to her anymore. What mattered was the power, the connections, the way people looked at her with respect and admiration. Her assistant, a nervous young woman named Claire, approached with a tablet. Ms. Hart, the anonymous donor, confirmed his attendance tonight. He'll be revealing his identity during the main ceremony. Evelyn's eyes lit up. Finally, 5 years of mystery, and tonight we meet our angel. $50 million, Claire. Do you understand what that means? It's very generous, ma'am. Generous? It's transformative. And whoever he is, he's going to stand on that stage next to me. Every camera in this room will capture that moment. Every newspaper will print that photo. She smoothed her dress. Make sure my makeup is perfect. Yes, ma'am. Evelyn scanned the room, imagining what the donor might look like. Old money, probably. Silver hair, distinguished. Maybe a tech billionaire. Or a hedge fund manager with a guilty conscience. She spotted someone near the ice sculpture. A tall black man in a shabby brown jacket holding hands with a small boy. Her smile faded. Claire. Yes, ma'am? Who is that man? Claire looked. I don't know, ma'am. He doesn't look like a guest. No, he does not. Evelyn's voice hardened. He looks like he wandered in from the street. And he has a child with him. At my gala. This is a black tie event, Claire, not a soup kitchen. Should I call security? Evelyn watched the man kneel down and speak softly to his son. Something about the gesture irritated her. The tenderness. The calm confidence. As if he belonged here. Not yet. Let me handle this personally. James saw her coming. He recognized Evelyn Hart from the Foundation's website, from the news articles, from the promotional videos where she smiled at immigrant families and posed for photographs with children who looked like props. He had studied her for months before making his first donation. He had believed in her mission. He had trusted her words. Now he would see if those words were real. Excuse me. James stood up straight. Good evening. Evelyn did not smile. I don't believe we've met. I'm Evelyn Hart, founder of the Hart Foundation. I know who you are. I'm James. This is my son, Elijah. Elijah waved shyly. Hello, ma'am. Evelyn barely glanced at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on James, examining him the way someone examines a stain on an expensive carpet. James, and how did you come to be here tonight? I received an invitation. An invitation. She said it slowly, as if the word itself was suspicious. From whom? From the Foundation. That's interesting, because this is a very exclusive event. Our guest list is carefully curated. Board members, major donors, corporate partners. She looked at his jacket. You don't appear to be any of those things. James kept his voice calm. Appearances can be deceiving. Can they? Evelyn stepped closer. Her perfume was expensive, overwhelming. Let me be direct with you, James. I don't know how you got in here. Maybe you found an invitation somewhere. Maybe you printed one. I don't really care. What I care about is the integrity of this event. I understand. I don't think you do. Her voice dropped lower. There are people here worth billions of dollars. CEOs, politicians, celebrities. They expect a certain environment, a certain caliber of guest. When they see someone like you wandering around she gestured at his jacket. In this, it raises questions. What kind of questions? Questions about security, about standards, about whether this foundation takes itself seriously. She glanced at Elijah. And bringing a child to an event like this. What were you thinking? This isn't a daycare. James felt his jaw tighten. He's my son. I take him everywhere. How touching. But this isn't everywhere. This is my gala. And frankly, you're making people uncomfortable. Which people? People who matter. James nodded slowly. I see. And I don't matter. Evelyn smiled. Cold, practiced. I'm sure you matter to someone. Just not here. Not tonight. She signaled to a security guard near the door. I'm going to have someone escort you out. Quietly. No scene. You can keep the appetizers you've eaten. I won't ask questions. Just go back to wherever you came from, and we'll pretend this never happened. Elijah tugged on his father's jacket. Daddy, are we in trouble? James looked down at his son. The confusion in those innocent eyes. The fear. He had seen that fear before, in the eyes of his own father, when white men in Lagos had looked at him with contempt. In the eyes of his mother, when she was denied service at a restaurant for being too dark. In his own eyes, every time someone saw his skin color before they saw his humanity. No, son, James said softly. We're not in trouble. This lady just made a mistake. Evelyn laughed. A mistake. The only mistake here is your presence. I have an invitation, Ms. Hart. A legitimate one. Anyone can print an invitation. That jacket tells me everything I need to know about whether you belong here. This jacket belonged to my father. How sentimental. I'm sure it's very valuable to Goodwill. She waved at the security guard again. Marcus, over here, please. The guard approached. Large man's stern face. He looked at James without expression. Ma'am? This gentleman seems to have wandered into the wrong party. Please escort him and his son to the exit, discreetly. Marcus looked at James. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, confusion. Ma'am, I think there might be a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. He doesn't belong here. Look at him. Ma'am, I really think... Marcus? Evelyn's voice was ice. I'm not paying you to think. I'm paying you to follow instructions. Remove him, now. James held up his hand. It's all right. I'll leave. Evelyn smiled triumphantly. Good. At least you know your place. James picked up Elijah. The boy wrapped his arms around his father's neck, face buried in the old brown jacket. But before I go, James said, I have a question. Make it quick. The Hart Foundation helps immigrant families like mine. My parents came from Nigeria with nothing. They worked 18-hour days. They sacrificed everything so I could have a better life. That's your mission, isn't it? Helping people like us. Evelyn's eye twitched. What's your point? My point is that you just looked at me, an immigrant, a father, a man who came here believing in your cause, and you saw nothing but a problem to be removed. You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask my story. You saw my jacket, my skin, my son, and you decided I was worthless. I decided you didn't belong at this particular event. There's a difference. Is there? Evelyn stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. Let me tell you something, James. I've worked my entire life to build this foundation. I've shaken hands with senators. I've dined with royalty. I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for people who look like you. So don't you dare stand there in your thrift store clothes and lecture me about compassion. I've done more for immigrants than you could do in 100 lifetimes. James looked at her for a long moment. Maybe, but I wonder what those immigrants would think if they could see how you treat one of their own when you think nobody important is watching. Evelyn's face flushed red. Get out. Now, before I call the police and have you arrested for trespassing. I'm going. James turned toward the exit, then stopped. One more thing. What? You said this event is for major donors, people who matter. He looked her dead in the eyes. What if one of those donors was standing right in front of you and you couldn't see him because you were too busy judging his jacket? Evelyn laughed. You? A major donor? Please, I've met homeless people with more convincing stories. I didn't say it was me. Then what are you saying? James smiled. A small, quiet smile. I'm saying that sometimes the most valuable things come in the most unexpected packages. Your father never taught you that. My father was a Fortune 500 CEO. He taught me to recognize quality when I see it. She looked him up and down one final time. And you, sir, are not quality. James nodded. Good night, Ms. Hart. Enjoy your gala. He walked toward the exit, Elijah still clinging to his neck. Behind him, Evelyn straightened her dress and smiled at a passing billionaire as if nothing had happened. James didn't leave. He stood in the corner near the coat check hidden behind a large pillar, holding his son in his arms. Daddy, why are we hiding? We're not hiding. We're waiting. Waiting for what? For the show to begin. He checked his watch. 20 minutes until the main ceremony. 20 minutes until the anonymous donor was supposed to reveal himself on stage. 20 minutes until Evelyn Hart would learn the most expensive lesson of her life. James had planned this moment for months. He had spent 5 years donating anonymously to the Hart Foundation. $50 million total. Every year the foundation had begged him to reveal his identity. Every year he had declined. He wanted to see the work being done, not receive praise for it. But lately rumors had reached him. Stories about the foundation's administration. Millions of dollars unaccounted for. Programs that existed only on paper. Staff members fired for asking too many questions. So he decided to investigate personally. He reached out to the foundation, finally agreeing to reveal his identity at this year's gala. He requested that his name be kept secret until the ceremony. He wanted to arrive unannounced, unknown, and see how the foundation's leaders behaved when they didn't know they were being watched. And now he knew. Daddy? Yes, son? That lady was mean. Yes, she was. Why was she mean? James kissed his son's forehead. Because she has a sickness, Elijah. A very common sickness. She looks at people and sees labels instead of human beings. She sees rich or poor, important or unimportant, valuable or worthless. She doesn't see souls. She doesn't see stories. She just sees categories. Will she ever get better? James looked across the ballroom at Evelyn, laughing with the senator, champagne in hand. I don't know, son, but tonight I'm going to give her some medicine. Whether it cures her or not, that's up to her. Elijah thought about this for a moment. Is the medicine going to taste bad? James smiled. For her, very bad indeed. The orchestra stopped playing. Claire stepped onto the stage, tapping the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The crowd settled. Waiters froze. All eyes turned to the stage. Thank you all for being here tonight. For 15 years, the Hart Foundation has worked tirelessly to support immigrant families across America. We've built shelters, funded education programs, provided legal assistance to thousands of families seeking a better life. Applause rippled through the room. Tonight we have a very special announcement. For the past 5 years, a mysterious benefactor has donated $50 million to our foundation. $50 million. This extraordinary generosity has transformed our work and touched countless lives. More applause. Evelyn beamed from her front row seat. Despite our many requests, this donor has chosen to remain anonymous, until tonight. Claire paused dramatically. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever, our guardian angel has agreed to reveal himself. Please join me in welcoming our most generous donor to the stage. A spotlight began to sweep across the room. Evelyn stood up, smoothing her dress, preparing to embrace whoever stepped forward. She imagined a silver-haired gentleman, a tech mogul, maybe someone European. The spotlight stopped. It landed on James Okonkwo standing near the pillar in his father's old brown jacket, his son in his arms. Evelyn's smile froze. Claire continued reading from her tablet. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. James Okonkwo, founder and CEO of Okonkwo Logistics International, one of the largest privately held companies in the United States. Net worth $2.3 billion. Our anonymous donor, our guardian angel. The room was silent. Every eye turned to James. Every eye turned to Evelyn. And in that moment, standing in that spotlight with his son in his arms, James Okonkwo smiled. Not a smile of triumph, not a smile of revenge, a smile of absolute, unshakable peace, because he had seen the truth, and now everyone else would see it too. The silence lasted exactly 7 seconds. 7 seconds that felt like 7 years to Evelyn Hart. She stood frozen in the front row, her champagne glass still raised in anticipation of a toast that would never come. Her brain refused to process what her eyes were seeing. The spotlight, the man in the old jacket, the child in his arms, the words still echoing from the speakers. $2.3 billion. Anonymous donor, James Okonkwo. The same James Okonkwo she had called worthless. The same James Okonkwo she had threatened to have arrested. The same James Okonkwo whose jacket she had mocked, whose son she had dismissed, whose dignity she had trampled in front of 100 witnesses. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the marble floor. The sound broke the silence like a gunshot, and then the whispers began. Is that really him? The man in the jacket. I saw Evelyn talking to him earlier. She didn't look happy. Oh my God, did she know? James walked slowly toward the stage. The crowd parted for him like the Red Sea, every face turning to watch his journey. He held Elijah close, the boy's arms wrapped around his neck, those innocent eyes wide with confusion at all the sudden attention. Claire stood at the microphone, her tablet shaking slightly in her hands. She had seen the confrontation earlier. She had watched her boss humiliate this man, and now she understood the magnitude of what had just happened. Mr. Okonkwo, Claire managed her voice wavering. Please, the stage is yours. James climbed the 3 steps to the stage. He set Elijah down gently, keeping hold of his small hand. The boy looked up at him with complete trust. Daddy, why is everyone looking at us? James smiled down at his son. Because they're surprised, Elijah. People are often surprised when things aren't what they expected. He turned to face the crowd. 300 of the wealthiest, most powerful people in New York stared back at him. CEOs who controlled billions. Politicians who shaped policy. Celebrities whose faces graced magazine covers. And there in the front row, Evelyn Hart, her face the color of ash. James did not speak immediately. He let the silence stretch. He let them look at him, really look at him in his father's old jacket, and his dusty boots, and his faded khaki pants. He wanted them to see. He wanted them to understand. Good evening, he finally said. His voice was calm, steady, filling the ballroom without effort. "My name is James Okonkwo. Some of you have never heard that name. Some of you have heard it whispered in business circles. And one of you heard it about 30 minutes ago, right before she tried to have me thrown out of this building." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward Evelyn. She seemed to shrink in her $14,000 dress. "I want to tell you a story," James continued. "It's not a long story, but it's an important one. It's the story of why I'm standing here tonight in this jacket instead of the $10,000 suit hanging in my closet at home." He paused, looking down at Elijah, then back at the crowd. 32 years ago, a man named Emmanuel Okonkwo left Lagos, Nigeria with his wife and his 7-year-old son. That man was my father. He had $43 in his pocket, a degree in engineering that no American company would recognize, and a dream that his son might have a better life. James touched the lapel of his jacket. This was his jacket. He wore it every day for 27 years. He wore it when he worked as a janitor, mopping floors at midnight so he could take classes during the day. He wore it when he finally got his engineering license revalidated after 9 years of trying. He wore it when he started his own small construction company with money he borrowed from other immigrants who believed in him. His voice grew softer, but somehow it carried even further. He wore it when he walked me to school on my first day in America, when the other kids laughed at my accent and my clothes. He wore it when he told me that a man's worth is not measured by what he wears, but by how he treats others. And he wore it on the day he died when he handed it to me and said, "James, never forget where you came from. Never forget who helped you when you had nothing. And never ever become one of those people who look at a poor man and see something less than human." James looked directly at Evelyn. "I wear this jacket to remember my father, but tonight I wore it for a different reason. I wore it because I wanted to see something. I wanted to see what kind of people my $50 million have been supporting." Evelyn finally found her voice. It came out high, desperate, nothing like her usual polished tone. "Mr. Okonkwo, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. If I had known who you were—" "That's exactly the point, Ms. Hart." James's voice cut through hers like a blade. "You didn't know who I was. You looked at me and saw a poor black man in an old jacket with a child who didn't belong. You saw someone who couldn't possibly matter. Someone you could discard without consequence. I was concerned about security. You called me worthless. I never said. You said I was making people uncomfortable. You said I didn't belong. You said this wasn't a soup kitchen." James's eyes never left hers. "You looked at my son, my 7-year-old son, and you implied that bringing him here was inappropriate. You suggested I was a thief. You threatened to have me arrested." The whispers in the crowd grew louder. People were pulling out their phones recording. This was going to be everywhere by morning. "Mr. Okonkwo, please." Evelyn stepped forward, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I've devoted my life to helping immigrant families. 15 years of work. You have to understand I was stressed. The event, the pressure. I understand perfectly, Ms. Hart. I understand that when you thought I was nobody, you showed me exactly who you really are." James turned back to the crowd. "And that brings me to why I'm here tonight." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. 6 months ago, I received some troubling information about the Hart Foundation. Anonymous tips from former employees, stories about funds being misallocated, programs that existed only in press releases. I hired a team of forensic accountants to investigate quietly. Evelyn's face went from white to gray. What I found was disturbing. Of the $50 million I donated over 5 years, less than $12 million actually reached the immigrant families this foundation claims to serve. The rest went to administrative costs, luxury events like this one, consulting fees paid to companies owned by board members, and most interesting of all, a private real estate portfolio registered under Ms. Hart's mother's maiden name. The gasps were audible now. Board members shifted nervously in their seats. Lawyers reached for their phones. "That's a lie," Evelyn shouted. "That's slander. I'll sue you for everything you have." "I have $2.3 billion, Ms. Hart. My legal team bills more in a month than this foundation raises in a year. Please sue me. I would welcome the discovery process." Evelyn opened her mouth, then closed it again. She looked around frantically for support, but the people who had been laughing at her jokes an hour ago now looked at her like she was carrying a disease. James continued, his voice never rising above a conversational tone. "I came here tonight to do two things. First, I wanted to meet the woman who has been spending my money for 5 years. I wanted to see her face. I wanted to know if the person in the promotional videos, the person who hugs immigrant children for photographs, is the same person who exists when the cameras are off." He looked at Elijah, who was watching him with wide eyes. "Now I know. She is not the same person. In front of cameras, she is a saint. Behind closed doors, she is someone who looks at a black man and his son and sees garbage to be removed. Mr. Okonkwo, I am not a racist. I have black friends. I've donated to countless. Ms. Hart, I didn't say you were a racist. I said you looked at me and saw less than human. Maybe that's racism. Maybe it's classism. Maybe it's just the ordinary cruelty of someone who has spent so long pretending to be good that she's forgotten how to actually be good. I don't know what's in your heart. I only know what you showed me." He held up the folded paper. "The second reason I came here tonight is this. This is a letter from my attorneys to the New York State Attorney General's office. It formally requests an investigation into the Hart Foundation for fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of charitable funds. It includes all the evidence my team has gathered over the past 6 months. By Monday morning, investigators will have access to every financial record this foundation possesses." The room exploded. Board members were shouting. Lawyers were making phone calls. Someone knocked over a table of champagne glasses. In the chaos, Evelyn stood completely still, as if she had been turned to stone. James looked at her one more time. "You asked me earlier what kind of father brings a child to an event like this. I'll tell you. The kind of father who wants his son to see that integrity matters. The kind of father who wants his son to know that money without character is worthless. The kind of father who would rather wear his own father's old jacket and be treated with contempt than put on a costume and pretend to be something he's not." He picked up Elijah, who wrapped his arms around his neck. "I'm leaving now, Ms. Hart, not because you told me to, because I've seen enough. But before I go, I want you to remember something. Tonight, you had a choice. When you saw me in my old jacket with my son, you could have smiled. You could have welcomed me. You could have been curious instead of contemptuous. You could have treated me like a human being. If you had done that, I might have overlooked the financial irregularities. I might have given you a chance to explain. I might have believed that the woman in the videos was real." He turned toward the exit. "But you didn't do any of those things. You showed me who you are. And now everyone will know." The crowd parted again as he walked toward the door. But this time, the faces watching him weren't suspicious or confused. They were something else. Shocked. Ashamed. Some of them were looking at their own expensive clothes, their own jewelry, as if seeing them for the first time. "Wait." James stopped. He didn't turn around. Evelyn's heels clicked rapidly on the marble floor as she rushed toward him. Her perfectly styled hair was coming loose. Her mascara was starting to run. "Please wait. You can't do this. You'll destroy everything I've built. Everything." "You destroyed it yourself, Ms. Hart. I'm just making it visible. There are families who depend on this foundation. Real families. If you shut us down, they'll suffer. Is that what you want? To punish innocent people because you're angry at me?" James finally turned. "That's the first genuine thing you've said all night." "Then please, please, work with me. I'll step down. I'll let you audit everything. I'll pay back whatever was misused. Just don't destroy the foundation. Don't hurt the people we actually help." James studied her face. The desperation was real. but behind it, he could see the calculation. She was looking for an angle, a way out, a way to survive. "The families who depend on this foundation will be taken care of," he said. "I'm establishing a new organization tomorrow. It will be run by actual immigrants, supervised by an independent board with complete financial transparency. Every family currently receiving support from the Hart Foundation will be transferred to the new organization with no interruption in services." Evelyn blinked. "You planned this. You planned all of it." "I plan everything, Ms. Hart. That's how I built $2.3 billion from 43. "Then why did you come here tonight? Why the jacket? Why the whole performance? If you already had the evidence, why not just send the letter to the Attorney General?" James looked at Elijah. The boy had fallen asleep on his shoulder, exhausted by all the noise and confusion. He smoothed his son's hair gently. "Because I needed to know for myself. Numbers on a page don't tell you who a person really is. Financial records don't show you someone's soul." He met Evelyn's eyes. "I gave you every chance tonight. When you bumped into me, I apologized. When you accused me, I stayed calm. When you insulted me, I didn't fight back. I kept waiting for you to show me something human, some flash of kindness or curiosity or basic decency. I was having a bad day. A bad day reveals who you really are, Ms. Hart. Anyone can be charming when things are going well. Character is what you show when you're stressed and nobody important is watching." He shook his head slowly. "You failed the test. Not because you were having a bad day, because you've been having a bad life. Somewhere along the way, you forgot that people are people, not categories. You forgot that every stranger has a story. You forgot that kindness doesn't cost anything." Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. Real tears this time, not performance tears. "I didn't used to be like this," she whispered. "When I started the foundation, I really cared. I really wanted to help. But the money, the power, the events, the famous people telling me I was wonderful. Somewhere I lost myself." "Then find yourself again," James said. His voice was not cruel. It was not triumphant. It was simply honest. "You're going to face consequences for what you've done. Legal consequences. Professional consequences. But you're not dead. You're not in prison. You have time to become a different person if you want to. And if I do, if I change, will you forgive me?" James thought about this question. He thought about his father, who had forgiven countless insults and humiliations because he understood that bitterness was a poison you drink hoping someone else will die. He thought about his mother, who had cleaned houses for women who treated her like furniture and who had never let their contempt darken her spirit. Forgiveness isn't something you ask for, Ms. Hart. It's something you earn. Through action. Through time. Through becoming genuinely different, not just sorry you got caught. He shifted Elijah's sleeping weight on his shoulder. "Maybe someday you'll earn it. But that's not up to me. That's up to every person you've ever looked at and seen as less than human. That's up to every immigrant family you smiled at for cameras and ignored in real life. That's a long list of people, Ms. Hart. Better start working through it." He turned toward the exit for the final time. "Goodbye, Ms. Hart. I hope we never meet again. But if we do, I hope you're wearing an old jacket and dirty boots. I hope you're standing in a place where you don't belong, surrounded by people who look at you with contempt. And I hope someone shows you kindness. Because that's the only way you'll ever understand what you did to me tonight." He walked out into the cold New York night, his son asleep in his arms, his father's jacket warm against the wind. Behind him, Evelyn Hart sank to her knees on the marble floor, surrounded by shattered champagne glasses and the wreckage of everything she had built. The photographers captured it all. By morning it would be the most shared image in the country. But James didn't look back. He had done what he came to do. He had spoken his truth. Now it was time to go home, to put his son to bed, to hang his father's jacket carefully in the closet until the next time he needed to remember who he was. The limousines lined up at the curb meant nothing to him. The valets rushing to open doors meant nothing. He walked past them all, past the red carpet and the golden doors to the simple black car waiting at the end of the block. His driver, an old friend named Joseph, who had worked for his father decades ago, opened the rear door. "How did it go, sir?" James settled Elijah into the car seat, buckling him in carefully without waking him. "It went exactly as I expected." "The lady give you trouble?" James smiled tiredly. "The lady gave me confirmation." Joseph nodded. He had known James since he was a skinny kid struggling to learn English. He had watched him build an empire from nothing. He had been there the day Maya died, and the day Elijah was born, and every day since. "Your father would be proud of you." James looked down at the old brown jacket, at the patches on the sleeve, at the worn collar, at the buttons his mother had sewn on after the original ones fell off. "I hope so, Joseph. I really hope so." The car pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the lights and the noise and the chaos of the Grand Meridian Hotel. In the rearview mirror, James could see people streaming out of the building, could see the flash of cameras, could see the beginning of what would become the biggest scandal in New York's charitable world in years. But he wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about his son, about the lesson Elijah had witnessed tonight, about the world that boy would grow up in and the man James hoped he would become. He was thinking about Maya and how she would have handled tonight. She would have been fiercer than him, probably. She would have made Evelyn cry harder and longer. But she also would have offered grace at the end. That was who she was, fire and mercy in equal measure. He missed her so much it felt like a physical wound, even after 7 years. "Almost home, sir," Joseph said. James looked out the window at the city lights streaming past. This city that had taken so much from him. This city that had given so much to him. This city of cruelty and kindness, of poverty and wealth, of broken dreams and impossible comebacks. His father had loved this city, had believed in its promise even when that promise seemed like a lie, had worked himself to exhaustion building a small piece of it with his own 2 hands. James was still building, would always be building. That was what the Okonkwo's did. But tonight he was tired. Tonight he just wanted to hold his son and sleep and forget the look in Evelyn Hart's eyes when she realized who he was. Not the fear, not the desperation, the confusion. The genuine confusion of someone who could not understand how a man in an old jacket could possibly be worth more than her. That confusion told him everything he needed to know about what was wrong with the world, and what he still needed to do to fix it. The car turned onto his street. The house was dark, except for a light in the kitchen left on by the housekeeper, who came each day to cook and clean and help with Elijah when James was working. It was a modest house for a billionaire. 4 bedrooms, a small garden, a porch swing where James sat each night and watched the stars and talked to Maya in his heart. He could have bought a mansion. He could have bought 10 mansions. But this house was enough. This house was where Elijah had taken his first steps. This house was where Maya's spirit still lingered in the corners. This house was home. Joseph carried the sleeping Elijah inside while James followed with the old brown jacket over his arm. He laid his son gently in bed, pulled the covers up to his chin, and stood watching him breathe for a long moment. "Daddy." Elijah's eyes fluttered open. "Shh, go back to sleep." "Did we win?" James smiled. "Win what?" "You said we were going to see who people really are. Did we win?" James sat on the edge of the bed. "There's no winning, son. Not in the way you mean. But we learned something important tonight. We learned that some people need help to see clearly, and we have the power to help them see. Is the lady going to be okay?" James thought about this question, thought about Evelyn on her knees surrounded by broken glass. "I don't know. That's up to her. But we did the right thing, Elijah. We told the truth. We stood up for ourselves. And we didn't become like the people who tried to make us feel small. That's what matters." Elijah nodded sleepily. "Grandpa would be proud." James felt his throat tighten. Yes, he would. Now go to sleep. We have a big day tomorrow. What are we doing tomorrow? Building something new, something good. Elijah smiled and closed his eyes. Within moments, his breathing was deep and regular. James sat with him for a while longer, watching his son sleep, thinking about the future, thinking about the past. Then he stood, walked to his own room, and hung his father's jacket carefully in the closet. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The phone started ringing at 6 in the morning. James was already awake, sitting on the back porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sun rise over the garden Maya had planted 8 years ago. The roses were still blooming, tended now by the same hands that had once held his wife's, as she knelt in the dirt, laughing at how bad he was at gardening. He let the phone ring. He knew what was coming. By 7, Joseph had arrived with a stack of newspapers. The story was on every front page. The photographs were everywhere. James in his old jacket standing on that stage, his son in his arms. Evelyn on her knees surrounded by broken glass. The chaos of wealthy people fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. "It's bigger than we expected," Joseph said, laying the papers on the kitchen table. "The networks are calling it the scandal of the decade. The Attorney General's office released a statement at midnight. They're opening a full investigation." James sipped his coffee. "Good. The Foundation's board members are resigning one by one. 3 of them are already lawyering up. One of them tried to flee to the Caymans at 4 this morning. TSA stopped him at JFK. "Which one?" "Henderson, the real estate guy." James nodded. He had suspected Henderson from the beginning. The man's consulting fees alone had consumed nearly $8 million over 5 years. "What about her?" Joseph hesitated. "Ms. Hart is at her apartment. She hasn't come out. But the photographers are camped outside her building. Dozens of them. The neighbors are complaining." James felt something twist in his chest. Not quite guilt, not quite satisfaction, something in between. "She made her choices," he said quietly. "Now she faces the consequences." "Yes, sir." Joseph paused. "There's something else." "What?" Her assistant called, the young woman Claire. "She wants to speak with you. She says she has information you need to hear." James set down his coffee cup. "What kind of information?" "She wouldn't say, but she sounded scared, sir. Genuinely scared." James thought about Claire. The nervous young woman with the tablet. The one who had watched Evelyn humiliate him and said nothing. The one who had followed orders without question. "Set up a meeting. Somewhere private. This afternoon." "Yes, sir." Elijah wandered into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. "Daddy, why are there people outside our house?" James looked out the window. 3 news vans had parked on the street. Reporters were setting up cameras on the sidewalk. "They want to talk to Daddy about what happened last night." "Are you in trouble?" "No, son, I'm not in trouble." He lifted Elijah onto his lap. "But we're going to stay inside today. Maybe watch some movies. Would you like that?" Elijah nodded eagerly. "Can we watch the one about the fish?" "We can watch whatever you want." The phone rang again. James ignored it. He had 47 voicemails already. Reporters, business associates, old friends who hadn't called in years. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. But James had no interest in telling it again. He had said what he needed to say. Now he would let the wheels of justice turn on their own. The meeting with Claire happened at 3 o'clock in a small coffee shop in Brooklyn that Joseph had secured. The back room was empty, private, far from the cameras and the chaos. Claire arrived looking like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red. Her hands shook as she sat down across from James. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Okonkwo. I know I don't deserve it. You were in the room last night. You watched everything." "I watched for 3 years, Mr. Okonkwo, not just last night. 3 years of watching Ms. Hart treat people like garbage when she thought it didn't matter. 3 years of filing reports I knew were lies. 3 years of telling myself it wasn't my problem." James studied her face. "Why are you here now?" Claire pulled a flash drive from her purse. Her hands trembled as she placed it on the table. Because I can't live with myself anymore. And because what your investigators found is only the beginning. James didn't touch the flash drive. Explain. The financial fraud, the embezzlement, that's all true. But there's more. Things even the board members don't know about. Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. Ms. Hart has been taking money from people. Wealthy people. People who want their names kept out of certain stories. People who want certain investigations to go away. She's been selling influence. Worse, she's been selling protection. 3 years ago, a tech billionaire donated $2 million to the foundation. 1 week later, a harassment lawsuit against him disappeared. The victim received a settlement, but she also received threats. She moved out of state. She's never spoken publicly about what happened. James felt his stomach turn. How many times? At least a dozen that I know of. Politicians, CEOs, entertainment executives. They all donated large sums. They all had problems that mysteriously went away. Claire wiped her eyes. I have records, emails, bank transfers. Everything Ms. Hart thought was deleted. But I kept copies. I don't know why. Maybe I always knew this day would come. James looked at the flash drive. Such a small thing. Such an enormous weight. Why didn't you go to the police? Because I was scared. Because Ms. Hart has powerful friends. Because I thought if I just kept my head down and did my job eventually, I could leave and pretend none of it happened. Claire's voice broke. And then I watched her attack you last night. I watched her look at your son and call him a prop. And I thought about all the immigrant families the foundation claims to help. And I realized that I'm part of it. I'm complicit. Every day I said nothing, I helped her get away with it. You're coming forward now. I'm trying to do the right thing, finally, even if it's too late. James picked up the flash drive. He turned it over in his hands, thinking, this information will destroy more than just Evelyn Hart. It will destroy careers, maybe even lives. Some of the people on this drive will fight back. They have resources. They have lawyers. They might come after you. I know. Are you prepared for that? Claire met his eyes. For the first time since she sat down, she looked steady. Mr. Okonkwo, I watched you walk into that gala in your father's jacket. I watched you refuse to be humiliated. I watched you stand on that stage with your son and tell the truth even though you knew it would create chaos. If you can do that, I can do this. James nodded slowly. I'll make sure you have protection, legal and physical. My team will handle the information carefully. No one will know where it came from until you're ready to go public. And if I'm never ready, then it will remain confidential. But Claire, the best protection is transparency. Once everyone knows what you know, you become worthless as a target. Right now, you're the only loose end. If you testify, if you tell your story publicly, there's no reason for anyone to silence you. Claire thought about this for a long moment. My mother always said I was a coward. She said I let people walk over me because I was afraid of confrontation. She was right. I've been a coward my whole life. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's choosing to act despite fear. That sounds like something from a self-help book. James smiled slightly. It's something my father told me the first day I went to school in America. I was terrified. The kids were cruel. The teachers didn't understand me. I wanted to go home. But my father said, James, if you run away today, you will spend your life running. Stand your ground, feel the fear, and move forward anyway. Did you stand your ground? Every single day for 15 years, until standing my ground became second nature. He pocketed the flash drive. You can do the same, Claire. It's not too late. It's never too late to become who you want to be. Claire nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you, Mr. Okonkwo. Don't thank me. Thank the person you're about to become. She's the brave one. That night, James sat in his study reading through the files on Claire's flash drive. The information was worse than he had imagined. Names he recognized, Faces he had seen at charity events and business functions. Respectable people, powerful people, all of them connected to Evelyn Hart's web of corruption and silence. His phone rang. Private number. He answered. "Hello? Mr. Okonkwo, we haven't met. My name is Richard Harmon." James knew the name. Hedge fund billionaire, political donor, one of the most powerful men in New York finance. "How did you get this number, Mr. Harmon?" "I have resources, as I'm sure you understand." Harmon's voice was smooth-cultured, the voice of a man accustomed to getting what he wanted. "I'm calling because we have a mutual problem." "I don't believe we have anything mutual." "Don't be naive, Mr. Okonkwo. You've acquired certain information that could be damaging to a great many people who would prefer to resolve this situation quietly." James leaned back in his chair. "Resolve it how? Financially, professionally." "We understand you're establishing a new charitable foundation. We'd be willing to provide substantial support, 8 figures, perhaps 9. In exchange for certain files being deleted and certain conversations never happening." "You're offering me a bribe." "I'm offering you an opportunity. You're a businessman. You understand how the world works. The information you have could destroy lives, families, children would suffer. Is that what you want? To be responsible for that kind of collateral damage?" James thought about Elijah asleep upstairs. He thought about the children of the men on this flash drive. He thought about the ripples that would spread when the truth came out. "The children you're concerned about, Mr. Harmon, are the children of predators and criminals. They'll suffer because of what their fathers did not, because of what I'm doing. I won't carry that weight." "You're making a mistake." "Possibly, but it's my mistake to make." "You don't understand the forces you're dealing with. This isn't a business negotiation. This is a war. And you're outgunned." James smiled into the phone. "Mr. Harmon, let me tell you something. I grew up poor. I was mocked and dismissed and underestimated every single day of my life. I built a $2 billion company from nothing. I've survived things you can't imagine. So when you threaten me with war, I want you to understand something very clearly." "What's that?" "I've been at war my entire life, and I've never lost." The line went dead. James set down the phone and stared at it for a long moment. His hands were steady. His heart was calm. He had expected this call, had prepared for it since the moment he decided to expose Evelyn Hart. But expecting something and experiencing it were two different things. He walked upstairs and checked on Elijah. The boy was sleeping peacefully, one arm wrapped around a stuffed elephant Maya had bought him the day he was born. The sight of his son, so innocent, so unaware of the darkness in the world, filled James with a fierce protective rage. They would not touch his boy. They would not touch his family. He would burn down everything he had built before he let them hurt what mattered most. The next 3 weeks were chaos. The Attorney General's investigation expanded daily. Indictments started coming down. Henderson was arrested trying to board a boat to international waters. 2 board members turned state's evidence in exchange for reduced sentences. The media couldn't get enough of the story. And at the center of it all, Evelyn Hart. She had hired the most expensive lawyers in the city. She had given interviews proclaiming her innocence, claiming she was being framed by jealous competitors and vindictive former employees. She had even tried to spin the gala incident, claiming James had deliberately entrapped her, that the whole thing was an elaborate scheme to destroy her reputation. Some people believed her. People who wanted to believe that the system wasn't as corrupt as it seemed. People who couldn't accept that someone they had admired and donated to and posed for photographs with was actually a monster. But the evidence was overwhelming, and it kept growing. Claire went public 2 weeks after their meeting. She appeared on national television calm and composed, laying out everything she had witnessed over 3 years. She named names. She provided documents. She connected dots that investigators hadn't even known existed. By the end of the interview, Evelyn Hart's empire was ash. James watched the interview from his living room, Elijah asleep on his lap. The reporter asked Claire a question that made him pause. "Ms. Chen, you worked for Evelyn Hart for 3 years. You saw everything. Why did it take so long for you to come forward?" Claire thought for a moment before answering. "Because I was afraid. Because I told myself it wasn't my responsibility. Because I convinced myself that staying silent was the same as being innocent." She looked directly into the camera. "But I met someone recently who reminded me that silence is a choice, and that every choice has consequences. The victims of Ms. Hart's corruption, the families who were hurt, the people who were silenced, they deserve better than my fear. So I'm speaking now. Better late than never." James felt his throat tighten. He hadn't expected to be moved. He thought he had become numb to the whole situation, buried under paperwork and legal meetings and security briefings. But hearing Claire's words, seeing the courage it took for her to sit in front of millions of people and tell the truth, something shifted in his chest. He thought about his father, who had faced down injustice with quiet dignity every day of his life. He thought about Maya, who had always pushed him to be braver, to speak louder, to never let fear make his decisions. He thought about Elijah, who would grow up in a world shaped by the choices made today. And he realized that this was just the beginning. The Hart Foundation was one scandal in a sea of corruption, one exposed lie among thousands that remained hidden, one small victory in an endless war. But small victories mattered. They added up. They inspired others. They proved that the truth was still worth fighting for. The phone rang. James checked the number. His lawyer. "James, we need to talk." "What happened?" "Evelyn Hart's team just filed a lawsuit against you. Defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, tortious interference with business relations. They're seeking $500 million in damages." James almost laughed. "She's suing me." "She's desperate. Her lawyers know they can't win, but they're hoping to drag you through years of litigation. Discovery depositions motions. They want to make this as painful as possible for you. They want to tie up your resources and your attention so you can't keep pushing the investigation." "Will it work?" "Not if we fight back. And James, we have something they don't know about yet." "What?" "The flash drive Claire gave you. My team has been analyzing it. There's a file buried in there that changes everything. Recordings. Audio recordings of Evelyn Hart explicitly discussing the bribery scheme with Richard Harmon and 3 other individuals. She recorded her own crimes. Why would she do that? Insurance. Mutually assured destruction. If any of her co-conspirators tried to turn on her, she had evidence to take them down too. But now that evidence is in our hands." James closed his eyes. He thought about Harmon's call, the threats, the offer of money to make everything disappear. Release it. "James, if we release these recordings, it won't just destroy Evelyn Hart. It will take down some of the most powerful people in the country, politicians, business leaders. There will be consequences. Retaliation. Are you sure you want to open that door?" James looked at his son still sleeping peacefully on his lap. "My father came to this country with $43 and a dream. He believed that America was a place where hard work and integrity could overcome any obstacle. He was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right about that. Corruption only survives when good people stay silent. I won't stay silent. Release the recordings." "Understood. James, one more thing." "Yes." "Whatever happens next, I want you to know that it's been an honor working with you. Your father would be proud." James ended the call and sat in the quiet of his living room, his son breathing softly against his chest. The storm was coming. He could feel it gathering on the horizon, dark and terrible and inevitable. But storms passed. That's what his mother had always told him when he was frightened by thunder as a child. Storms come and storms go, but the sky remains. He would weather this storm. He would protect his son. He would honor his father's memory and his wife's legacy. And when the clouds finally cleared, he would still be standing. Elijah stirred in his sleep. "Daddy." "I'm here, son." "I had a dream." "What did you dream about?" "Mommy." She was smiling. She said to tell you that she's proud of you." James felt tears spring to his eyes. He pulled his son closer, burying his face in the boy's hair, breathing in the scent of innocence and love. "Thank you, Elijah. Thank you for telling me." Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, tapping against the windows, like fingers seeking entry. The storm had arrived. But James Okonkwo was ready. The recordings dropped at midnight. James had given his legal team instructions to release everything simultaneously across multiple platforms: news outlets, social media, direct uploads to the Attorney General's office. There would be no chance to suppress it, no opportunity for powerful people to call in favors and make it disappear. By 6 in the morning, the country had erupted. Richard Harmon's face was everywhere. A senator from Connecticut, the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company, a former cabinet secretary. All of them caught on audio discussing payments cover-ups and the systematic destruction of anyone who threatened their interests. James sat at his kitchen table watching the news on his tablet while Elijah ate cereal across from him. "Daddy, why is everyone so angry on TV?" "Because some people did bad things and now everyone knows about it. Are they going to jail?" "Some of them might. We'll see." His phone buzzed. A text from Joseph. "Security team reports increased activity outside. Recommend staying inside today." James typed back, "Understood. Keep me updated." The doorbell rang. Elijah looked up curious. James held up a hand, signaling him to stay seated, and walked to the front door. Through the security camera, he saw a face he recognized. Marcus, the security guard from the gala. The one who had tried to warn Evelyn and been shut down. James opened the door. "Mr. Okonkwo, I'm sorry to bother you at home. How did you find my address?" "I worked security for your company 3 years ago, before I took the foundation job." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I should have said something that night. When Ms. Hart was attacking you. I knew who you were. I knew she was making a mistake, but I was afraid of losing my job." "So why are you here now?" Marcus reached into his jacket pocket. James tensed, but the guard only pulled out an envelope. "I was cleaning out my locker this morning. The foundation terminated all staff last night. I found something that was hidden in the security office. Someone wanted it destroyed, but it got missed in the chaos." James took the envelope. Inside was a photograph. Evelyn Hart, shaking hands with a man James didn't recognize. Both of them were smiling. Behind them, barely visible, was a young woman with terror in her eyes. "Who is this?" "The man is Victor Reyes. He runs an import business in Miami. The woman is Maria Santos. She was a witness in a human trafficking case 3 years ago. The case collapsed when she suddenly recanted her testimony and disappeared." James felt cold spreading through his chest. Trafficking. "Mr. Okonkwo, I don't know how deep this goes, but I know that photograph was taken at a private event Ms. Hart hosted, and I know that Maria Santos was never seen again after that night." James stared at the photograph. The young woman's eyes haunted him. She couldn't have been more than 20 years old. "Why are you bringing this to me?" "Because you're the only person powerful enough to do something about it. The police, the FBI, they've all been compromised at some level. I've seen it. People making calls, cases disappearing. But you've already proven you can't be bought. You've proven you're willing to fight. This is bigger than financial fraud, Marcus. This is life and death." "I know. That's why I came." Marcus hesitated. "Mr. Okonkwo, I have a daughter. She's 12 years old. When I look at that photograph, I see her face. I see every little girl who's ever been taken and sold and forgotten. I can't live with myself knowing I had this information and did nothing." James looked at the security guard, really looked at him for the first time. He saw the same exhaustion, the same moral weight that he had seen in Claire's eyes. Good people trapped in corrupt systems, slowly finding the courage to break free. "Thank you, Marcus. This took courage. It took too long. But better late than never, right?" That's what the young woman on TV said. Claire. "Yes, that's exactly what she said." Marcus nodded and turned to leave, then stopped. "Mr. Okonkwo." "Yes." The night of the gala, when Ms. Hart was screaming at you, your son asked if you were in trouble. You said no. You said you weren't in trouble. Marcus's voice was thick. I've been in trouble my whole life, afraid, compromising, looking the other way. Watching you stand there in your father's jacket holding your son refusing to be diminished. It changed something in me. I just wanted you to know that. James watched him walk away, disappearing into the gray morning. He looked down at the photograph again. Maria Santos. A name, a face, a life that had been erased for someone's profit. This wasn't over. It was barely beginning. The next 48 hours were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and revelations. James brought the photograph to his legal team, who immediately contacted federal investigators. The name Victor Reyes triggered a cascade of connections: shell companies, international wire transfers, properties in countries without extradition treaties, and at the center of it all, Evelyn Hart. She hadn't just been protecting wealthy predators from harassment lawsuits. She had been part of something far darker. A network that moved money, influence, and human beings across borders with terrifying efficiency. The FBI raided her apartment on the third day. James watched the footage on live television, Elijah at school. The house quiet except for the news anchor's breathless commentary. Breaking news this hour. Former charity founder Evelyn Hart has been taken into federal custody as part of what officials are calling the largest human trafficking investigation in New York history. Sources tell us that Hart is expected to face multiple charges, including conspiracy, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. The camera showed Evelyn being led out of her building in handcuffs. She looked smaller than James remembered. Older. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a simple gray sweatshirt. Her perfectly styled hair hung limp and unwashed. For a moment, just a moment, James felt something like pity. Then he remembered Maria Santos. The terror in her eyes. The way she had vanished without a trace. The pity evaporated. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered anyway. Mr. Okonkwo. The voice was female. Tired. Broken. Who is this? My name is Maria Santos. James gripped the phone tighter. You're alive. Barely. I've been hiding for 3 years, moving from city to city, using different names, waiting for the people who took everything from me to face justice. Her voice cracked. I watched the news this morning. I saw her being arrested. I need to know if it is real, if it's finally over. It's real, Maria. She's in custody, and it's not just her. The whole network is being dismantled. Silence on the line. Then a sound that James recognized. The sound of someone crying who had forgotten how to cry. Deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the body. Maria, are you safe right now? I don't know. I haven't felt safe in 3 years. Tell me where you are. I'll send a security team. We'll get you to a safe location. We'll connect you with federal prosecutors. Your testimony could put these people away forever. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. James thought about his father. About the $43 and the old brown jacket. About every immigrant who had ever been exploited, used, discarded. Because my father taught me that we're responsible for each other. Because I have a son, and I want him to grow up in a world where people don't look away from suffering. Because I have resources and power, and I'd be a coward if I didn't use them to help. Maria was silent for a long moment. I'm in Philadelphia, a shelter on Broad Street. I've been here for 2 months. Stay there. Someone will be there within the hour. You'll recognize them. They'll be wearing a brown jacket. Why brown? Because it reminds me why I fight. He ended the call and immediately dialed Joseph. I need our best team in Philadelphia within the hour. There's a woman named Maria Santos. She's a witness. She's the key to everything. Understood, sir. Anything else? Yes. Find whoever has my father's old jacket. Tell them to wear it. Sir. Just do it, Joseph. She needs to see something. She needs to see that there are still people worth trusting. 3 days later, Maria Santos testified before a federal grand jury. James wasn't in the room, but he watched the updates from his legal team. Maria's testimony was devastating. Names, dates, locations. Properties where women were held. Routes used to move them across state lines. Officials who had been paid to look the other way. By the end of the week, 17 additional arrests had been made. The network that had operated in the shadows for over a decade was being dragged into the light. But the cost was enormous. Maria had to relive her trauma in excruciating detail. She had to face lawyers who tried to discredit her, who suggested she was lying for money or revenge. She had to describe things that no human being should ever have to describe. James visited her once after her final day of testimony. She was staying at a safe house his foundation had provided. A small apartment in a quiet neighborhood guarded around the clock. When he arrived, she was sitting by the window, staring at nothing. "How do you feel?" "Empty." Maria didn't turn to look at him. "I thought it would feel different. I thought when they finally believed me, when they finally arrested the people who destroyed my life, I would feel something. Relief. Victory. Closure." She shook her head. "I just feel empty." James sat down across from her. "When my wife died, people kept telling me it would get easier. That time heals all wounds. That I would find peace eventually." He paused. "They were wrong. It never got easier. The wound never healed. But I learned to carry it. I learned to build a life around the absence instead of waiting for it to fill." "How?" "My son. Every morning I wake up and I see his face and I remember why I'm still here, why I keep fighting, why I can't give up." He leaned forward. "Maria, what happened to you was unforgivable. No amount of justice will undo it. But you're alive, you survived, and you just helped save countless other women from suffering the same fate. That matters. Even if it doesn't feel like it matters right now." Maria finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were red swollen. "The man who came to get me in Philadelphia. He was wearing the brown jacket. Your father's jacket." "Yes." "Why?" "Because my father believed that symbols matter. He believed that how we present ourselves to the world says something about who we are. He wore that jacket every day as a reminder of where he came from. I sent it to you as a reminder that there are still people who care about where you're going." Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small photograph. A young girl, maybe 5 years old, with Maria's eyes. "My daughter, Isabella. She's with my sister in California. I haven't seen her in 3 years. I've been too afraid. Afraid they would find her if I went near her. Afraid they would hurt her to get to me. The network is gone, Maria. The people who threatened you are in custody. You can see her again." "Can I?" The hope in her voice was painful. "Is it really over?" "It's over. I promise you, it's over." Maria's face crumpled. She pressed the photograph to her chest and wept. James didn't say anything. He just sat with her, bearing witness to her pain, honoring it with his presence. Sometimes that was all you could do. Sit with someone in their darkness and refuse to look away. The trial of Evelyn Hart began 6 months later. James was called as a witness on the 3rd day. He wore his father's jacket. The courtroom was packed. Media, spectators, families of victims, politicians who wanted to be seen on the right side of history. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Evelyn sat at the defense table, dressed in a conservative blue suit, her hair pulled back, her face a mask of controlled emotion. She had lost weight in custody. Her cheekbones were sharper. Her eyes were duller. James took the stand and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor approached. "Mr. Okonkwo, please tell the court about your first encounter with the defendant." James looked at Evelyn. Their eyes met for the first time since the gala. "I met Evelyn Hart on the night of September 15th at the Hart Foundation annual gala. I was wearing this jacket." He touched his lapel. "The same jacket I'm wearing today. It belonged to my father." "And what happened at that encounter?" Ms. Hart approached me in the ballroom. She assumed based on my appearance that I didn't belong at the event. She demanded that security remove me. She called me worthless. She mocked my clothing. She implied that I was a thief. She suggested that my son, who was 7 years old and standing next to me, had been brought to the gala inappropriately. Did Ms. Hart know who you were at that time? No. She saw a black man in an old jacket and assumed I was nobody. And what were you actually? I was the anonymous donor who had given $50 million to her foundation over the previous 5 years. I was there to reveal my identity and meet the person who had been spending my money. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Mr. Okonkwo, in your view, why does this encounter matter? James took a breath. Because it revealed who Evelyn Hart really is. Not the person in the promotional videos. Not the person who smiled for cameras and hugged immigrant children for photo opportunities. The real person. The one who emerges when she thinks no one important is watching. Objection. The defense attorney stood. This is speculation about my client's character. Overruled. The witness may continue. James nodded. That night I learned that Evelyn Hart sees human beings as categories, rich or poor, powerful or weak, useful or disposable. When she looked at me, she didn't see a person. She saw a problem to be removed. And I believe that same worldview is what allowed her to participate in the crimes she's accused of. When you don't see people as human, it becomes very easy to exploit them. Evelyn's mask cracked. Just for a second. Something flickered in her eyes. Rage, or maybe recognition. The prosecutor continued. After the gala, you began investigating the Hart Foundation more closely. What did you find? Financial irregularities at first. Millions of dollars that couldn't be accounted for. Programs that existed only on paper. But as we dug deeper, we found something much worse. Evidence of a network that used the foundation as a front for money laundering, bribery, and ultimately human trafficking. Did you have any direct contact with Ms. Hart after the gala? Once. She filed a lawsuit against me for defamation. $500 million. Her lawyers made it clear that the purpose of the suit was to exhaust my resources and distract me from continuing the investigation. Did the lawsuit succeed? No. It was dismissed when the criminal charges were filed. The prosecutor returned to her table and picked up a document. Mr. Okonkwo, I'd like to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 47. Can you identify this photograph? James looked at the image on the screen. Maria Santos' terror in her eyes. Evelyn Hart smiling. This is a photograph taken at a private event hosted by Ms. Hart approximately 3 years ago. The young woman in the photograph is Maria Santos, who has already testified in this trial. She was a witness in a human trafficking case that collapsed shortly after this event. She disappeared for 3 years, hiding from the people who threatened her life. And the man shaking hands with Ms. Hart, Victor Reyes. He has since been indicted on 14 counts of human trafficking and is awaiting trial in federal court. The courtroom was silent. The prosecutor turned to face Evelyn. Mr. Okonkwo, you've donated over $50 million to charitable causes. You've built a billion-dollar company from nothing. You could have walked away from this situation at any point. Why didn't you? James thought about the question. He had asked himself the same thing countless times over the past 6 months. Because my father taught me that money without integrity is worthless. Because I have a son who watches everything I do and learns from my example. Because somewhere in this world there are little girls like Maria Santos's daughter who deserve to grow up free and safe. He paused. And because when I walked into that gala in my father's jacket, I made a choice. I chose to see the truth, even when it was ugly. Once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And if you have the power to do something about it, you have the responsibility to act. The prosecutor nodded. Thank you, Mr. Okonkwo. No further questions. The defense attorney approached. James could see the calculation in his eyes. The determination to discredit, to confuse, to plant doubt. Mr. Okonkwo, isn't it true that you have a personal vendetta against my client? No. You weren't humiliated by her at the gala. I was mistreated. That's different from humiliation. Humiliation requires me to feel shame, and I feel no shame about who I am. But you were angry. I was disappointed. I had believed in Ms. Hart's mission. I had trusted her with my money. Discovering who she really was painful, but not because of my ego, because of all the families who believed in her too. You deliberately set up the confrontation at the gala, didn't you? You wore old clothes specifically to provoke a reaction. I wore my father's jacket to honor his memory. If Ms. Hart had treated me with basic human decency, she would never have known I was testing anything. Her cruelty was her own choice. The defense attorney pressed on for another hour, but James remained calm, steady, unshakable. He had told the truth. He had nothing to hide. When he finally stepped down from the witness stand, he walked past Evelyn Hart's table. She looked up at him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Evelyn said very quietly, so only James could hear, "You destroyed my life." James stopped. He looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the mask to the person underneath. The person who had made choice after choice after choice, each one leading her deeper into darkness. "No, Ms. Hart. You destroyed your own life. I just turned on the lights." He walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The verdict came 3 weeks later. Guilty on all counts. James was home when the news broke. Elijah was playing in the backyard, chasing butterflies, his laughter drifting through the open window. Joseph called with the news. "It's over, sir. Evelyn Hart will spend the rest of her life in prison. Harmon got 25 years. Rhea's got life without parole. The network is finished." James thanked him and ended the call. He walked to the window and watched his son play. 8 years old now, growing so fast, looking more like Maya every day. It was over. But nothing was really over. The world was full of Evelyn Harts, full of networks that exploited the vulnerable, full of people who looked at a man in an old jacket and saw something less than human. The fight would continue. It would always continue. But today, just for today, James allowed himself to feel something like peace. He walked into the backyard and sat on the grass next to his son. "Daddy, I caught a butterfly." Elijah held up his cupped hands, eyes shining with wonder. "Let me see." The boy opened his hands carefully. Inside, a monarch butterfly rested on his palm wings, slowly opening and closing. "It's beautiful," James said. "Can I keep it?" James shook his head. "Some things aren't meant to be kept. Some things are meant to be free." Elijah thought about this for a moment. Then he lifted his hands toward the sky and opened them wide. The butterfly hesitated, then took flight, rising higher and higher until it disappeared into the blue. Elijah watched it go with a smile. "Bye, butterfly." James pulled his son close and held him tight. "I love you, Elijah." "I love you too, Daddy." They sat together in the warm afternoon sun, father and son watching the sky where the butterfly had vanished. And somewhere James knew his father was watching too. 1 year passed. The seasons changed. The news cycle moved on. New scandals replaced old ones. The world kept spinning indifferent to the battles that had been fought and won. But James Okonkwo remembered everything. He stood at the window of his new foundation's headquarters, watching the city below. The Okonkwo Foundation for Immigrant Families had opened 6 months ago in a modest building on the Lower East Side. No marble floors, no crystal chandeliers, just clean rooms, dedicated staff, and a mission that actually meant something. "Mr. Okonkwo," he turned. Claire stood in the doorway, tablet in hand. She had become the foundation's executive director, a position she had earned through her courage and her commitment to making things right. "The senator is here for his meeting." "Which senator?" "Morrison, The one who replaced the Connecticut senator who went to prison. James nodded. The ripples from the Hart Foundation scandal had spread further than anyone expected. 7 politicians had resigned or been indicted. 12 corporate executives had lost their positions. The network that had operated in the shadows for so long had been dismantled piece by piece. Send him in. Senator Morrison was young, idealistic, everything his predecessor had not been. He shook James's hand with genuine warmth. Mr. Okonkwo, thank you for meeting with me. What can I do for you, Senator? I'm introducing legislation next month. Stronger oversight for charitable organizations. Mandatory transparency requirements. Whistleblower protections. Morrison paused. I want your endorsement. Your story, what you did, it changed the conversation. People listen when you speak. James considered the request. A year ago, he would have refused. He had never wanted to be a public figure. He had built his wealth quietly, donated anonymously, preferred to work in the shadows. But the shadows were where corruption thrived. The shadows were where people like Evelyn Hart and Richard Harmon had operated for years without consequence. I'll endorse your legislation, James said, on one condition. Name it. The bill includes funding for immigrant legal services. Real funding, not token gestures. Families fleeing violence and persecution deserve lawyers who can actually help them, not overwhelmed public defenders with 100 other cases. Morrison nodded immediately. Done. I'll add it to the draft today. Then you have my endorsement. They shook hands again. As Morrison turned to leave, he paused. Mr. Okonkwo, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I may not answer. The night of the gala, when Evelyn Hart attacked you, you could have revealed who you were immediately. You could have shut her down in seconds. Why did you let her keep going? James thought about that night. The coffee on the floor. Evelyn's face twisted with contempt. Elijah's small hand gripping his. Because I needed to see, not just who she was, but who I was. When someone treats you like garbage, you have a choice. You can respond with anger. You can respond with revenge. Or you can respond with truth. He paused. I chose truth. I let her show the world exactly who she was. And in doing so, I showed myself that I could face cruelty without becoming cruel. That takes incredible self-control. It takes practice. 30 years of practice. James smiled slightly. My father used to say that the measure of a man is not how he treats his equals, but how he treats those he believes are beneath him. Evelyn Hart showed me her measure that night, and I showed her mine. Morrison left and James returned to the window. Below on the street, families were arriving for the Foundation's weekly orientation session. Mothers holding children, fathers carrying documents, young people with dreams in their eyes and fear in their hearts. They reminded him of his own family 30 years ago, the uncertainty, the hope, the desperate belief that America would be different, that America would be better. For some of them, it would be. The Foundation would make sure of that. His phone buzzed. A text from Joseph. Elijah's school play starts in 2 hours. Should I bring the car? James typed back. I'll walk. Need the air. He grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. His father's jacket. The patches were more visible now, the fabric more worn, but he would never replace it. Some things were irreplaceable. The walk to Elijah's school took 30 minutes. James passed through neighborhoods that had changed dramatically since his childhood. Gentrified blocks where immigrant families had once lived. Luxury condos where bodegas used to stand. The city was always changing, always evolving, always forgetting its past while rushing toward its future. But some things remained constant. The school was a public elementary. Nothing fancy, the kind of place where working-class families sent their children because private schools were beyond their reach. James could have sent Elijah anywhere. The most exclusive academies in the country would have welcomed the son of a billionaire. But Maya had wanted public school. She had believed that Elijah needed to grow up alongside children from all backgrounds, all circumstances. She had believed that privilege should be a foundation for empathy, not isolation. James had kept that promise. He arrived at the auditorium just as the lights were dimming. A teacher recognized him and ushered him to a seat near the front. The program said the play was The Journey Home, a student-written production about immigrant families. The curtain rose. Elijah stood center stage wearing a costume that looked suspiciously like his father's old jacket. He held a cardboard suitcase in one hand and a small photograph in the other. "My name is Emmanuel," Elijah said, his voice clear and strong. "I came to America with $43 in my pocket. I came because I believed that my son deserved a better life. I came because I believed that hard work and integrity could overcome any obstacle." James felt his throat tighten. The play told the story of an immigrant father and son, their struggles, their triumphs, their unbreakable bond. It was clearly inspired by James's own story, adapted by Elijah with help from his teachers. In the final scene, the father character lay in a hospital bed dying. The son knelt beside him. "Papa, I'm scared. What will I do without you?" Elijah, playing the son, took the father's hand. "You will do what I taught you. You will work hard. You will tell the truth. You will treat every person with dignity, even those who do not deserve it. And you will wear this jacket." He lifted the cardboard jacket from the bed. "This jacket is worthless to everyone but us. But to us, it is worth more than gold. It is a reminder of who we are, of where we came from, of why we fight." The father character closed his eyes. The son held the jacket close. "I promise, Papa. I will never forget." The lights dimmed. The audience erupted in applause. James was crying. He didn't try to hide it. Some tears were not weakness. Some tears were a testament to love. After the play, Elijah found his father in the crowd. "Did you like it, Daddy?" James knelt down and pulled his son into a fierce embrace. "I loved it. Your grandfather would have loved it too. I wrote it for him, and for you." Elijah pulled back and looked at his father with those serious brown eyes. "Is that okay? That I told our story?" "It's more than okay. It's perfect. My teacher said I should ask you first. She said some stories are private. Our story isn't private, Elijah. Our story is a gift. The more people who hear it, the more people might be inspired to become who they're meant to be." Elijah nodded solemnly. Then his face brightened. "Can we get ice cream?" James laughed. "We can get ice cream." They walked out of the school, hand in hand, father and son, the old brown jacket, and the young boy, who would one day inherit it. The ice cream shop was a small family place run by a Vietnamese couple who had immigrated 20 years ago. They knew James by sight, though they had never asked about his wealth or his fame. To them, he was simply the nice man who always ordered vanilla for himself and chocolate for his son. Mr. Okonkwo Elijah, the usual Mrs. Nguyen. They sat at their regular table by the window. Elijah attacked his ice cream with enthusiasm, while James watched content to simply be present in the moment. "Daddy, yes. At school, some kids say we're rich. We are rich. But we don't act rich. We don't have a big house. You don't have a fancy car. You wear Grandpa's old jacket." James nodded. "Does that bother you?" Elijah thought about it, chocolate ice cream dripping down his chin. "No. I like our house. I like that you walk me to school. I like that we come here for ice cream instead of some fancy place." He paused. "But I don't understand. If we have money, why don't we use it?" "We do use it. We use it to help people. The foundation, the scholarships, the legal services for immigrant families. That's what our money does. But for us, why don't we use it for us?" James leaned forward, wiping the chocolate from his son's chin with a napkin. "Elijah, when I was your age, we had nothing. We lived in a tiny apartment with no heat in the winter. I wore the same clothes to school every day because we couldn't afford more. Some kids made fun of me. Some adults looked at me like I was worthless. He paused. Those experiences taught me something important. They taught me that happiness doesn't come from things. It comes from purpose, from connection, from knowing who you are and what you stand for. So we don't need a big house. We don't need a big house. We need each other. We need work that matters. We need to treat people with kindness and expect kindness in return. James smiled. And we need ice cream on special occasions. Elijah grinned. Today is a special occasion. Every day with you is a special occasion. The bell above the door chimed. A woman entered, hesitant, looking around as if unsure she belonged. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and tired eyes. James recognized her immediately. Maria Santos. She spotted him and walked over her steps uncertain. Mr. Okonkwo, I'm sorry to interrupt. I went to your office and they said you might be here. Maria, please sit down. He pulled out a chair. This is my son Elijah. Hello, Elijah. Hello. Elijah studied her with innocent curiosity. You look sad. Maria's eyes glistened. I'm not sad. I'm overwhelmed. What happened? James asked. Maria reached into her bag and pulled out a photograph. A woman and a little girl standing in front of a small house with a garden. Isabella and my sister. They came to New York last month. For the first time in 3 years, my family is together again. James looked at the photograph. The little girl had Maria's eyes. She was smiling, gap-toothed and joyful. She's beautiful. She doesn't remember me. Maria's voice cracked. I missed 3 years of her life. 3 years of birthdays and first days of school and scraped knees and bedtime stories. She looks at me like I'm a stranger. Give it time. That's what everyone says. But time was stolen from me. By Evelyn Hart, by Victor Reyes, by all of them. Maria wiped her eyes. I came here because I wanted to thank you, and because I wanted to ask you something. Ask. How do you do it? How do you move forward after everything that was taken from you? Your wife died. You raised your son alone. You faced prejudice and cruelty and people who tried to destroy you. But you're still standing. You're still fighting. You're still good. She looked at him with desperate hope. How? James was quiet for a long moment. He thought about Maya, about his father, about all the dark nights when he had wanted to give up, to surrender, to let the grief and the anger consume him. I don't have a secret, Maria. I have a choice. Every morning I wake up and I choose to keep going. I choose to believe that the world can be better. I choose to see the humanity in people, even when they refuse to see it in me. He paused. Some days the choice is easy. Some days it's the hardest thing I've ever done. But I keep making it over and over because the alternative is becoming someone I don't want to be. What if I'm not strong enough? You survived 3 years of hiding. You testified against some of the most powerful people in the country. You looked them in the eye and told the truth. James shook his head. Maria, you're not wondering if you're strong enough. You already know you're strong enough. You're wondering if you're brave enough to believe it. Maria stared at him. Then slowly a small smile appeared on her face. You sound like a fortune cookie. James laughed. My wife used to say the same thing. She sounds like she was wonderful. She was. She was everything. He looked at Elijah, who was finishing the last of his ice cream, oblivious to the weight of the adult conversation. And she gave me him. So even though I lost her, I never lost everything. I had a reason to keep fighting. Maria looked at the photograph of her daughter again. Isabella is my reason. Then hold on to that. On the darkest nights when you feel like giving up, look at her face. Remember that she needs you. Remember that every choice you make shapes the world she'll grow up in. James reached across the table and gently touched Maria's hand. You're not alone anymore. You have people who care about you. You have resources and support. But more importantly, you have yourself. You survived. That's not luck. That's strength. Maria nodded slowly. She looked like she wanted to say something more, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she simply squeezed James's hand and stood up. Thank you, Mr. Okonkwo, for everything. Take care of yourself, Maria, and take care of that little girl. She left the ice cream shop walking a little straighter than when she came in. Elijah looked up. Who was that daddy? Someone who needed to be reminded that she's strong. Did you help her? I hope so. We'll see. Elijah nodded, accepting this answer with the simple trust of childhood. Can we go home now? I want to show Grandpa's jacket to my stuffed animals. James smiled. You want to show the jacket to your stuffed animals? I want to tell them the story. About Grandpa coming to America. About how he wore the jacket every day. About how you wear it now. Elijah's face was serious. They need to know. Then let's go home and tell them. They walked back through the city as the sun began to set. The sky turned orange, then pink, then deep purple. The streetlights flickered on one by one, like stars coming out to watch over them. At home, James sat on Elijah's bed while the boy arranged his stuffed animals in a semicircle. There was a bear named Marcus, an elephant named Maya, a lion named Emmanuel. Each one had been named for someone important in their family's story. Okay, Elijah said, settling into position. Everyone listen. I'm going to tell you the story of the jacket. James watched as his son began to speak, his small voice filling the room with words that had been passed down through generations. A long time ago, there was a man named Emmanuel. He lived in a faraway place called Nigeria. He was poor, but he was brave. He wanted his son to have a better life. So he saved his money, and he bought a ticket to America, and he packed everything he owned into one small bag. Elijah held up the jacket, which was far too big for him, but which he wore with obvious pride. This was his jacket. He wore it every single day. When people made fun of him, he wore it. When people told him he didn't belong, he wore it. When he was cold and hungry and tired, he wore it. Because it reminded him of who he was and why he was fighting. James felt tears building again. He didn't stop them. Emmanuel had a son named James. He taught James everything he knew. He taught him to work hard. He taught him to tell the truth. He taught him to treat every person with kindness, even when they didn't deserve it. Elijah looked at his father. And when Emmanuel died, he gave the jacket to James. He said, "This jacket is worth more than gold. Never forget where you came from." Elijah walked over to James and climbed onto his lap. Now James has a son named Elijah. That's me. He grinned. And someday when I'm big, James is going to give me the jacket. And I'm going to wear it every day. And I'm going to tell everyone about Emmanuel and James and why we fight. James wrapped his arms around his son and held him close. That's the best story I've ever heard. Did I tell it right? You told it perfectly. Elijah yawned, the exhaustion of the day finally catching up with him. Daddy. Yes. I'm glad you're my daddy. I'm glad you're my son. Within minutes, Elijah was asleep, still wearing the jacket that was 3 sizes too big for him. James carefully removed it and hung it on the bedpost where the boy could see it when he woke up. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his son breathe. This was why he fought. This was why he endured. This was why he got up every morning and chose to believe in a better world. Not for himself, not for revenge, not for justice, for this boy, for the man he would become, for the world he would inherit. James walked to his bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. On the nightstand was a photograph of Maya taken on their wedding day. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her eyes full of joy. I hope I'm making you proud, he whispered. I hope I'm raising him the way you would have wanted. He could almost hear her voice, that warm, fierce, loving voice that had guided him through the darkest days of his grief. You are James. You are. He lay down and closed his eyes. Tomorrow there would be more battles to fight, more injustices to confront, More people who would look at his jacket and see worthlessness instead of worth. But tonight he was at peace. He had his son. He had his purpose. He had the memory of the people who had loved him and the promise of the future he was building. And he had the jacket. That old, worn, patched, irreplaceable jacket that had traveled from Lagos to New York, from poverty to wealth, from one generation to the next. It was just fabric and thread. It was worthless to everyone but them. But to them, it was everything. The next morning, James woke to find Elijah standing beside his bed, the jacket draped over his shoulders like a cape. "Good morning, Daddy." "Good morning, son. I've been thinking." "About what?" "About what I want to be when I grow up." James sat up, giving his son his full attention. "And what did you decide?" Elijah climbed onto the bed and sat cross-legged, the jacket pooling around him. "I want to be like you. I want to help people. I want to wear Grandpa's jacket and tell everyone our story." He paused, his young face serious. "But I also want to be like me. I want to write plays and make people feel things. I want to tell stories that make sad people happy and mean people kind." James felt his heart swell with pride. "You can be all of those things, Elijah. You can be anything you want to be." "Promise." "I promise." Elijah nodded, satisfied. Then he bounced off the bed with the sudden energy that only children possess. "Can we have pancakes?" James laughed. "We can have pancakes." They made breakfast together, father and son moving around the kitchen in comfortable rhythm. The jacket hung on a hook by the door, watching over them like a guardian spirit. Outside, the sun was rising over the city. A new day was beginning. A new story was being written. And somewhere in that great mystery beyond life and death, Emmanuel Okonkwo was smiling. His jacket had found a worthy home. His legacy would live forever. His grandson would carry the torch. Because true wealth was never measured in dollars or possessions. True wealth was measured in love, in integrity, in the courage to stand for what was right when no one was watching. James Okonkwo understood that now more clearly than ever. He had walked into a gala in his father's old jacket and been treated like garbage by a woman who claimed to help people like him. He had exposed corruption that reached the highest levels of power and wealth. He had protected his son, honored his wife's memory, and fulfilled his father's dream. And through it all, he had remained who he was: a builder, a father, a man who saw human beings instead of categories. The world was full of people like Evelyn Hart, people who looked at a man in an old jacket and saw something less than human, people who measured worth by wealth and power and appearance. But the world was also full of people like Emmanuel Okonkwo, like Maya, like Claire and Maria and Marcus, and all the others who had found the courage to stand up, speak out, and choose truth over comfort. The battle between these two groups would never end. It was as old as humanity itself. But James knew which side would ultimately prevail, because darkness could not survive in the presence of light, because lies could not survive in the presence of truth, because cruelty could not survive in the presence of love. Elijah finished his pancakes and ran to get ready for school. James watched him go, his heart full. Then he walked to the hook by the door and took down his father's jacket. He put it on, feeling the worn fabric settle against his shoulders like an embrace. He looked in the mirror, and he saw not a billionaire or a scandal maker or a crusader for justice. He saw his father's son. He saw his wife's husband. He saw his son's father. He saw a man who knew exactly who he was and would never apologize for it, and that was worth more than all the gold in the world. James Okonkwo smiled at his reflection. Then he walked out the door to face whatever the new day would bring. Because that's what the Okonkwos did. They kept building. They kept fighting. They kept standing, and they never ever forgot where they came from.